Hello, everybody. I think we're starting officially. It's 9:45 here in Boston time. And thanks, welcome to all of you from all sides of the world, and in your whatever it is, morning, afternoon, or evening. So we'll get started. We have a very full agenda for today. I just want to introduce Tanya Platter here, Marion Wittenberg. Marion, you ready? So the three of us are gonna share this session. We also have some helping us with Sonia and Kaylin. Sonia Barbosa and Kaylin Boyd helping us with note taking and moderation and helping to get the session going and smoothly. So thanks for all your help too. And we'll have also three presenters, which I'll introduce very soon. We're ready. I'm going to start sharing the screen. Thanks. So here, the agenda for today, we're going to have first the presentations. There will be 10 minutes each. And we will have somebody controlling the time so we don't go over. We want to make sure we have time for discussions. As part of these presentations, we'll introduce already some questions that we want to discuss in the breakout rooms that we'll have in the second part of the session. And then we'll come back all together and provide some the feedback from the breakout rooms and the summaries to report back to the entire group. So let's get started. So I'm going to be talking first about how we propose or how we intend and we were working now not only just the proposal at this point for this meeting, but what we've been working for the last years to figure out how the best way to support data tags or sensitive data in Dataverse. But my presentation will be a focus on data tags, which is a system that provides sensitive levels for data, so that you could assign them. Based on the level of sensitivity, you could assign, and the security and access requirements mostly, you could just assign them a specific level, and then based on that, see how it needs to behave in the repository. This will be easier just by explaining by going into the slides, but one of the things is important here is that the data tags, as it was presented in a publication some years ago by Latanya Sweeney, Michael Barsinai, I believe Michael is here now, and myself, has been adapted quite a bit, and we've done some iterations of that to see how it would fit, how can be interpreted and implemented in a Dataverse repository. So it's not exactly, the definitions here are not exactly the same that were provided in the initial paper. So first, when we're talking about supporting sensitive data in Dataverse, just want to clarify that so far we haven't done that yet in the Dataverse repositories. We accept data that is considered non-sensitive, even though sometimes it's identified data. There might be some area have some risk of identification, but it's not considered sensitive by the institution or by an organization as they define sensitive data. So we have so far Dataverse today supports the data tags that we call blue, green, and yellow. In this case, you can upload the data directly through HTTP or through the API or the other forms of uploading, getting data to Dataverse as of now, and it's stored locally, so might be stored in different ways as an S3 bucket or in in a file system, in a network file system, but it is local. It's not stored in the where the data in a remote storage that is governed or administered by a third party. So that includes Blue as the public, completely public data that it has no barriers to download. Green as a publicly open, but you need to register in order to access the data. And then yellow as it is restricted, but it's not considered sensitive data. You still need to get permission, to be granted permissions to access the data set, but it's not sensitive. This is supported, as I said, now in Dataverse software. It's supported in the Harvard Dataverse. It's supported in many of the repositories that use Dataverse. So what we are talking today is about supporting what we would define as sensitive data. And in this case, saying that the data cannot be stored locally in the Dataverse repository, but it's in a trusted remote storage or a data enclave that might be managed by they would be managed by the data provider, right? The data owner that might happen to be the repository, the same user or the same as the repository itself, but it could be a third party altogether. So in this case, the metadata gets published in Dataverse, but the data needs to be accessed in the enclave. We classify the data sets for the sensitive data as orange, red, and crimson. Orange would require is what would correspond to moderate sensitive data sets with less requirements on less strong security requirements, basically, and auditing requirements for your data set. And then red, as higher sensitive that requires more audits of the data. And crimson, in this case, I'm not, well, after this slide, I'm not going to talk about crimson more, but it's for maximum sensitive data. And in this case, it would be stored in a room outside a network, and you would not be, only the metadata could be stored in Dataverse. So if we just thought it would be useful to compare with what we have at Harvard as security levels, and give us some examples of what it means to have the data sets that are blue, green, yellow, and orange, red, and crimson. So just quickly, for blue, green, and yellow, usually you would, at least in the case of Harvard University and for other organizations, it's something similar. The reviewer, reviewer would decide whether it's non-sensitive or sensitive, and it would, and this blue, green, yellow would go into a security level storage of 1 or 2, and that might be some public data, the identified data that might not, well, that might not be about individuals at all, too, but it would fit into these categories. There is a very useful, here there is a link of a PDF, a useful table that has a lot more details about examples of data sets that fit into these security levels. For sensitive data, then it's what Harvard calls security level 3, 4, and 5. And the examples, for example, for orange would be education data in the US and the FERPA regulations, GDPR, but not extra sensitive level data would be in orange. For red would be government issued identifiers, HIPAA regulated personal health information data, or GDPR extra sensitive levels. For the security level 5, we're not going to focus much on it, but it would be information that could put the subject, that if it is disclosed, it could put subject life and risk. So how we're proposing to support the sensitive data, the orange and red, in Dataverse. So as I said, the metadata would be published in Dataverse, but the data sets would live in a data enclave, and there would be a connection. I mean, when publishing a sensitive data set would mean to push the metadata and the data use agreement associated with that data into Dataverse and establish a connection about where the data resides and what are the policies that need to be applied to that data to be able to access or use the data in the data enclave. So for this data publishing model, we're looking at questions for the discussion that are about for your existing Dataverse repositories or for your existing data centers or data organizations. What do you have now for sensitive data? If you have anything, you have already data in place. How do you imagine supporting sensitive data in a Dataverse installation with your own data enclaves or third-party data enclaves? And that includes what kind of tool would be useful for you to connect the metadata from publishing Dataverse with the enclave? What would be if that could be needs a user interface, a command line tool, or what would be the right tool for that? And if you have already a tool.
1 minute.
Okay, so I have quite a bit of, I'm gonna go to the next ones that we're gonna review the questions just before the breakout, but I just wanna show quickly these 2 slides. So for the data use model, what it means now is that the data is in, you can find the data in Dataverse because you have the descriptions with the metadata, but you would go through a notary service. This is all part of one of the components of impact. The project impact is going to be presented also as part of this session, and you will get a lot more details by Ilya Baldin will present that later. But when you go through the notary service, has information about the users that can use the data in an approved secure computer environment that is connected to the data, to the TRSA or the data enclave, and can access the data directly there, or in another model. Instead of you might not have the permissions or the collaboration or the signed data or the data use agreement that you need in order to work on the data directly, the raw data, but you could have access to differential private statistical releases of the data. And in this case, OpenDP, which also will be presented in this session, would be part of that model and would have to talk to the data. Well, would be in a secure computer environment that talks to the TRSA or the sensitive data. Okay, so and here are some questions. Since I'm running out of time, I'm just gonna leave for the questions that Tanya will go over before we do the breakout session. So okay, now we're gonna move to the next presentation by Laura Huis in Veld from DANS on DataTags recommendation survey.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
We will first share my screen. Let's see. Is this working, the slideshow? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay, hello, everyone. Today I would like to tell you about our DataTags recommendation tool. It was made by my colleague Eco for the EOS Cup project. I will talk about the architecture of this tool, and I will give a quick demonstration of how this works within Dataverse. And then I have some suggestions for follow-up or steps that need to be done. But first, I would like to tell you something about the project, a short introduction. EOSC stands for European Open Science Cloud. It's a project funded by the European Union. And the main aim of this project is to facilitate access to research data. And therefore, a common policy framework for data sharing is important to have. And that's why it's also important for this project. Well, let me rephrase. The main goal of one of the goals of this project is to build services that support and comply with data sharing policy recommendations. And within Work Package 2, DANCE is working on an implementation of a data tag recommendation tool. And this tool is compliant with the European GDPR. So in this next slide, you see an image of the architecture of this tool. Our aim was to make this service as generic as possible. So it can be used with different decision trees or questionnaires. This because different countries can have specific legislation. So it's important to have this generic. And it also makes it possible to connect this service to different repositories. So for example, to Dataverse. As long as this repository supports the use of REST API, it can be connected to the service. Okay, and in this presentation, I will use Dataverse as an example. So in the Dataverse settings, you can configure to which tool you would like to, well, decision tree actually you would like to connect to. So when the user completes the questionnaire, the result is sent to the service, and then the service sends it back to the repository. What it does actually is that the service uses an XSLT to create an XML file. This XML file contains, well, the answers of the questionnaire, the tag color as a result, and the provenance information of the decision tree that was used. And this also contains a persistent identifier of this questionnaire. And because we use XSLT, it doesn't really matter which decision tree you use, because the service can read every result in the end. Let's see. Then this service is generated from the OpenAPI. So when it receives the results from the data tag questionnaire, it uses this as input for the API calls that it will send to the application of your choice. So you can see that in the middle. For each repository, you need a plugin, and this plugin is used by the service to push the information back to the repository. So everything is transferred through the plugin, through the repository of your choice. So that's basically how it works. We test this with Dataverse, our prototype. It is not yet in production, but we just wanted to see how it could work within Dataverse. So we added the option of data tags here underneath edit files. So when you click on this button, this label, you will get a pop-up screen. It shows the selected files, and it can give some information about the recommendation tool that you are going to use. And well, the labels and buttons, they are not final yet. This is just a prototype, but then it says here, go to the data tag service. And then you will see in another tab in your browser the questionnaire. So this is, as an example, the DANCE questionnaire. So the user will have to complete the decision tree. So this is just one of the questions from the DANCE decision tree. And when you reach the end, you will get a data tag color as a result. And you can see the confirm button here. And when you click that button, that's when the information is being sent back to the data tag recommendation service. And this information also contains the provenance information, and you can see this here. And this is currently in JSON format. Can be stored in Dataverse as well. And then when you return to your dataset page, you will see the tag displayed just next to the file. Well, that's in short how it could work. But then it's important to realize that this tool only informs the depositor about the level of sensitivity of the data, but it doesn't enforce the security measures yet. And that's also, of course, the most important aspect of this. So we have to think about how to further implement this. So we have some to-dos on policy level. We should decide which security measures should be applied to which color. For example, if you have a blue tag, maybe we should enforce that there are no restrictions at all for this file. And another aspect is the workflow, because now I showed you, you could add a tag from the dataset page from edit files, but maybe it would be better to offer this recommendation tool directly after you upload a file. And another thing to think about is the responsibility, because maybe you would only want users with curator roles to be able to add a data tag. So there are many things to think about. And also on technical level, we have to see how we can implement this. One of the suggestions is to make use of IRODS rules. We could include the rules in the package that is sent back to the service, and then we can send this back to the repository. Could be an option. And also maybe we could upload the file through the data tag recommendation tool, so you don't start at the Dataverse user interface, but you just start when you open the recommendation tool. And of course, this also implies that we need to change the Dataverse user interface for this. So there's still work to be done. Well, this was it already, my short demonstration. So thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Laura. Thank you. And since we'll have this discussion later, we're going to go to James Honaker now on OpenDP. And if you can share your screen, James. And yes, and if you have questions, if you want to add to the chat while we're talking, well, I think that Caitlin and Sonia were going to help us to collect all these questions.
I'm adding the questions.
Okay, good. So we at the end of the presentations, we'll have some time for questions, and then we'll go to breakout rooms.
Right.
Great. Hi, my name's James. I'm going to talk about the OpenDP community, which is a project to build a suite of differentially private tools for preserving the privacy of sensitive data, primarily in a research context. Sorry. I'll talk about a minimum viable product that we're particularly building, which we plan to integrate with the Dataverse systems and deployments. I'll talk about broader tools as well that I think many people in these meetings will be interested in possibly using as components in their own portals or end-to-end systems for data analysis. And then primarily the goal of this talk today is to get people involved in this community. So I'll talk about different ways that different types of researchers and archivists and data users and data publicists and policymakers might be interested in participating in this community if you're interested in data privacy. I'm one of 4 PIs who are working to launch and incubate this community. Somehow I was lucky and drew the long straw and got to speak about it today. But any of these other people here and many others who are already involved in this community could talk to you as well. Okay. So what is OpenDP? It is, again, the goal of the project is to build a community of researchers and data users and even people who are just interested in protecting vulnerable subjects for building open source tools for deploying differential privacy. Differential privacy is a gold standard definition of what it means to preserve sensitive and private data from accidental leakage or malicious attack. The project has been supported by the Sloan Foundation, and I'd be remiss not to point that out at this point. And I'll talk a little bit about how we've kicked off and where we are at present and where we'll be in the next year. We have a website at opendp.io if you're interested in a lot of more details about things that I'm talking about today. That's the first place to go for more information. Okay, so the first thing I'll talk about is the community itself and how it's being built out. I'll talk about some of the tools and components and algorithms and things that are going to be offered as part of this community. And then for systems builders or for data portals or for repositories to use and in their ecosystem. And then I'll speak specifically about one end-to-end system that's already been built within the OpenDP community that might be of interest to you, and an MVP that we're building as a community whose major use case is the Dataverse use case. Okay, so OpenDP again it really is fundamentally a community effort. You might have seen that the 4 PIs were all here at Harvard. That was because we were willing to do the lift to try and find funding and get this thing off the ground, and Sloan was very generous in supporting us. But the goal here really is to make this a collective of individuals who are all interested in this topic. There are lots and lots of academic researchers who work in this fast-moving field now of differential privacy. Most of them work on their own individual scopes of work. They're interested in privacy of graph data or privacy of tabular data or privacy of joins. And lots of these people build individual prototypes or code that exemplifies their ideas, but it's hard to get that work into practice. It's hard to get that work into deployment. So the goal here is to have all of those researchers, as well as systems builders and users and analysts and people who are representing government and subjects, work together as a community to have one shared code base that allows us to build on each other's vetted code and to have lots of eyes on the code. Right, when we're dealing with privacy, when we're dealing with cryptography, we want to have community standards and community vetting, so that we're more confident of this, so we're absolutely confident rather that the stuff is correct. And we think this will allow these ideas that are being developed in academia and in industry to more quickly be adopted across all of these possible use cases. Okay. Also, part of the reason for this community is to connect these researchers with the people who want to use these tools. So there's often a broad disconnect between the people who are doing computer science theory and the people who are building portals to actually use this stuff. And they may not appreciate what the actual needs of the community are. And so having this community that shares will sort of open up what the pragmatically useful research directions are for the field. And hopefully that'll help the community too. Okay, so again, project site is at opendp.io. Everything today I think is being recorded, so for posterity you'll be able to find some of these other links. At that website you'll see that there's a white paper that outlines all of the things that the community is intending to do and different ways for people to be involved. And everything that we're producing is open source under the MIT license. So you can get you can delve into the code of anything I'm talking about today or that we're proposing in the future at this GitHub. Okay, so already this community has an oversight, and when I say that it's, it's not just the PIs, there's an oversight community of 30 people, 30 experts who are representing the full spectrum of people who might be involved in this community. So that includes researchers in differential privacy, but also statisticians or other users or data archivists, people who are building systems, okay? To try to make sure that the community is meeting all of these needs simultaneously. And then in addition to this oversight committee, lots of different layers at which different experts with different focuses are reviewing the algorithms, reviewing the software, reviewing the implementations as they're coming into the system, and making sure that they're up to the specs that we need, that they meet the security guarantees that we're providing to people, okay? This community also has sort of several layers, right? People who are focused on the code, who are focused narrowly their entire career on privacy might be at the core of this community, but people who are interested in who are in the legal world or policymakers and working out whether differential privacy meets their needs, they can be involved in the community. And then more broadly, there are ways for this to disseminate into industry and government and academia. So there are lots of degrees at which you might be interested in being part of this community, okay? We kicked this off in the spring of last year with a pitch to the research community who works in differential privacy, got a lot of feedback that was very positive. A lot of people saying, yes, it's very hard to build everything from scratch for everything I ever want to do. I would like to rely on an open source common code base that everybody contributes to. We began hiring staff here in the sort of incubator at Harvard in the fall of last year and the winter of this year. We developed a programming framework for some of the core libraries in the spring, and we had our own community meeting just in May where we had over 300 participants, again, across this whole spectrum of people interested in working on this project. Okay, so as I said, over 300 participants. Some of these faces will seem very familiar to people at the Dataverse community meetings. Others, like Salil has been here before, obviously, as well, but others, some such as our partners at Microsoft, new people in this world, okay? Where we're going, at this point, we're sort of still absorbing all of the information that came out of that community meeting. But we plan to be issuing specifications and guidelines about exactly what we're building beyond the initial white paper over this summer and launch a minimum viable product in the fall. We already have a lot of prototypes that we're drawing on and experience from previous projects. So this is a pretty aggressive schedule, but it's also fairly realistic, okay? So I will talk a little bit about the use case for this minimum viable product that we're creating. The goal here is to open up sensitive data for exploratory data analysis or for statistical research through the Dataverse context. And the idea might be, now this would also work with certain government agencies and certain industry applications, but the idea here is you have sensitive data. You can't make that sensitive data initially available to researchers, even if they're trusted. They might need to go through an IRB. They might need to get the author's permission. They may need to go through very, very many channels. Things that we've learned from the Dataverse community meetings is that often people go through all those channels and then find out that the data, when they finally get access to it, wasn't the data they were actually looking for. It didn't have enough people of a particular type that they needed for their analysis, or it didn't have the relationships that they were expecting in order to run in their model.
1 minute, James.
Opening up, thanks, differential privacy. For that, differential privacy allows researchers to use that, that use case, okay? So differential privacy allows analysts to ask queries of the data set and get back answers, but the answers are slightly noisy, such that you can guarantee that if somebody was a malicious adversary and they were asking questions, they wouldn't be able to learn or re-identify anything about any individual in the data set. They wouldn't even be able to identify if an individual was removed from the data set entirely. Okay, so that gives a very, very strong privacy preservation, privacy guarantee against adversaries or accidental leakage of the data, okay? Deployments like this have been seen in industry by Apple, by Google, by Uber, by the Census Bureau, but they've been heavily, narrowly targeted to very, very specific use cases. And the idea of Dataverse is you don't know what an analyst necessarily wants to ask of that project. So we've seen a few portals starting to open up on data repositories. Again, fairly heavily engineered to ask a fairly narrow, specific set of questions. The goal here would be through OpenDP that we can enable systems to be more general, to reutilize common components like a library of underlying algorithms, common budgeting tools, and other components that we need for an end-to-end deployment. One example of an end-to-end deployment that we already have is a system that OpenDP has been building joint with Microsoft. This is an end-to-end platform to allow DP analysis on sensitive data in the cloud through Kubernetes, in particular here Azure, but there's nothing specific to Azure here. Okay, so there is a microsite that I'd encourage you to go visit. There's an architecture that looks a lot like the PSI architecture for people who've seen this before, where an analyst can ask queries of the data is private, it's behind a curator, you get back out privacy preserving answers and never get to see the raw data, okay? There's a large number of things already stood up in this end-to-end system, including an SDK toolkit, SQL integration, and a library of algorithms, okay? The library is in Rust, so it's very performant and memory safe. We'll be offering a GUI, and we'll be offering ways to connect to things like IPython notebooks. So those would be the primary ways that your Dataverse could have integration to this particular system, okay? If you want to get involved, obviously contact us, take a look at the website. There are a number of discussions that we're having in the future, continuing to have breakout discussions with the community, and we'd love for you to get involved. If you want more information, if you think your Dataverse might be a very good use case for our first deployment of this MVP, we'd love to talk to more Dataverse instances about which ones might be good trials. And we had a number of, all of the meetings and the plenary sessions were recorded from our community meetings. So that's another place where you could learn more about our project. Okay. Again, here's the OpenDP website. Feel free to contact me directly or OpenDP at that more general info address. Read the white paper and take a look at our software repositories. Thank you.
Thanks so much, James. A lot of very useful information, and I'm sure, well, there are questions. We're going to go through to the next presentation, though, and then we'll have some time for questions for all the presentations, plus the discussion later. Ilya, hi, Ilya. Ilya Baldin will be presenting on the impact project that I already mentioned, as having several of the components that we plan to use as a way to support sensitive data in Dataverse.
Hello. I want to first of all thank you, Merce, for asking me to speak to this meeting. Sounds like a very, very productive meeting going on. A few words about this project. So Impact is an NSF-funded effort with multiple institutions. It was funded as part of CC Star Big Data program 3 years ago. Total budget about $3 million.
Ilya, just one thing. We see the presenter mode, maybe. I don't know if you want to change it. We see it well, but just
let me do that. How about this?
That's better. Thanks.
All right.
Okay, great.
Right. So you can see the names of my co-conspirators here. John Crabtree, I think, is in this meeting. Tom Nikiba from SSRI at Duke, Social Science Research Institute, Jeff Chase from Computer Science at Duke, Charlie Neifel from the Duke IT organization. This is a bi-institutional, actually tri-institutional project. We also have help from the Indiana University Center for Advanced Cybersecurity Research, who acted as a pink team for our design and implementation. The main focus of the project is developing an approach for reducing friction in multi-institutional social science research, which of course the friction primarily comes in acquiring and operating on the restricted data sets. And while in social science, the restricted data sets typically refers to the fact that the data contains PII, our approaches are applicable also to settings where data may be restricted to commercial concerns, for instance. So for this project, we had a number of design principles that I just wanted to kind of elucidate a little bit here. First of all, we wanted to decouple the data and the metadata to enable discovery, and Mercy already talked about that quite a bit in your presentation. We wanted to, very importantly, maintain the autonomy of data owners to control access to the data. So the idea here is not to solve the friction by essentially becoming a broker between data owners and researchers, but rather give everybody the right mechanisms so they can kind of fend for themselves, as it were, but in a way that preserves their policies and their desires to control the access to data. We wanted to abstract the negotiation process for the data so that we could incorporate a broad range of options in the data use agreements. Wanted to automate as much compliance checks as well as access decisions. And we wanted to enable a repeatable policy compliant analytics environment. So when I talk about analytics here, I'm really talking about kind of a more generic type of approach where you're using R or MATLAB, sort of standard tools. Things like what James presented earlier with differential privacy, I think they're quite orthogonal. We also have a thrust within this project that I won't talk about, referring that deals with secure multi-party computation, which is yet another orthogonal way of dealing with privacy restricted data, but it's not part of today's presentation. So the approach that we picked was essentially to design a suite of distributed solutions that are designed to work together but can also be leveraged independently. And this was really driven by my prior experience in designing various systems where, you know, you may design a perfect system that has 15 components, but if you require all those 15 components to operate, your chances of it being adopted are nil, right? What you want is to provide a way for people to adopt your solutions in parts in such a way that they fit their own deployments. So we kind of provide, with an impact, we provide 3 of these kind of solutions that are orthogonal to each other, but work together, but also could work separately. One is we make the data discoverable in Dataverse without compromising its privacy, and this is through the TRSA, Trusted Remote Storage Agent, that Mercedes talked about earlier. We create repeatable, secure infrastructure for performing collaborative analysis. And the repeatable here is emphasized because, you know, most IT organizations know how to stand up an enclave, but they're all kind of snowflakes, right? What you want is a process by which you can have a guaranteed way of kind of having this enclave in a way that's policy compliant, it's standard, and yet at the same time not so rigid that is not to be unusable, because that's the other sort of extreme in the space where you might get a perfectly secure enclave, but you can't do anything without it because installing even the simplest new tool requires 15 levels of approval. And finally, we wanted to automate the decisions about data access and then link that to the data use agreement approval process. In contrast to existing solutions, for instance, kind of what you see today with data aggregators, this system is fully distributed. When I will show you multiple components, and there could be many of everything, right? There's no assumption here of a centralized any single thing. So I'm going to briefly talk about individual components, and then I'm going to show you the picture of the overall architecture. At the end of the slide deck, there's reference to the GitHub repositories and our website, where you can watch a short video, which kind of explains at a high level what the various parts of the system do. I won't talk about those today. Just know that all of this exists. It's at the level of what we'd like to call MVP +1, which is slightly above a minimal viable product. And we are kind of currently in discussions with several organizations about pilot deployments for their needs of various parts of this architecture. Again, just to emphasize, it's not a one or all or nothing. You can kind of pick the components that you like for your needs. So the first component, again, Mercedes talked about, is TRSA, Trusted Remote Storage Agent. And what this is it's a piece of software that sits on your premises as a data owner or data provider. You own it, you control it, you configure it. And it makes private data discoverable via Dataverse. It harvests the metadata, the selected metadata, and posts it to a selected Dataverse instance so that your data set can become discoverable without actually moving your data set into Dataverse. And it uses Dataverse API. John Crabtree and his group designed and implemented this, and I know they've worked quite a bit with Mercedes to kind of make that possible between those two systems. TRSA can be used for a number of reasons, right? And it can be used in a standalone mode without all other parts of impact. You can use it in order to advertise a private data set. You could also use it to advertise a data set that's just too large to move, which is becoming a problem in a number of disciplines at this point. Another piece of this is a system called ProConsole, and also it kind of comes as packaged with protected data enclave. And what this is it's that repeatable virtual environment for computing unrestricted data. It's built typically on top of some sort of virtualization technology, in this case, VMware. It's easily customizable using Singularity container, so that basically researchers can add new tools to their environment via these vetted Singularity containers without compromising the overall security of the enclave. ProConsole provides granular access control using federated identity to different instances within that enclave, and it's OS independent in that ProConsole provides a browser-based access to these virtual environments. You basically open your browser, you point it at ProConsole, you log in, you select which virtual instances you want to talk to. If those are part of what your institutional administrator allows you to see, you log in and you see a desktop on your browser and you interact with it just like if it were your desktop. However, the data exfiltration, it becomes, very difficult unless you're using some sort of, screen scraping. It becomes quite impossible. Presidio is also a component owned by the data owner or data provider, and it guards access to private data hosted by that provider. It supports complex policies expressed in data log. I will show a little bit about that later. And it works together with Notary Service to essentially verify that the data use agreement has been satisfied before opening access to a data set. And it provides both browser and API-based access. Finally, there's a Notary Service. I like to call it as a mediator of interactions. You have multiple types of stakeholders, multiple roles here. You have the data provider over here. You have some members of institutional governance and compliance, typically IRB. You have your infrastructure provider, which may be your campus IT, or it could be a cloud provider, for instance, public cloud provider. And of course, you have researchers. All of them need to interact in order to complete the DUA, in order to satisfy data provider's requirements so that data which is owned by the data provider can be extracted. And so that's the role of the Notary Service, is in negotiating those.
1 minute.
Yep, almost done. So this is the overall architecture. The paths here are kind of, you can see there's Notary Service, TRSA, and Dataverse, ProConsole, the Enclave, Presidio. So discovery is done by first TRSA publishing the metadata to Dataverse, and then researcher discovering the data and being pointed to a particular instance of Notary Service. Notary Service helps negotiate for access between all of these principals. You have access to, once the data is accessed, it can be processed at Enclave and accessed by a researcher through ProConsole, configured by the infrastructure provider. And then you have this mediated automated access decisions between Notary Service and Presidio. Basically, let me skip this slide. Typical DUA human readable looks like this. We convert it into a workflow and a set of data log rules, which are then operated on by our system. I'm running out of time to say more, but I think there's basically, oh, here you go. There's a website, cyberimpact.us, if you'd like to visit that, and a list of resources about the project. The various, everything is open source, everything is under MIT license, federated identity support throughout all components, etc.
Thank you, Ilya. Excellent. Very important discussion for what we need to talk about here and for Dataverse. I hope that helped the audience to understand better what I was talking about, that I just talked at a very high level and just put it in the context of the impact components that Ilya presented. So we're gonna have some time for questions. I'll let Tanya see how much time we could have for questions before we go to breakouts. We may do the breakouts a little bit shorter, so to allow for questions now. But Sonia, do you have questions compiled?
Yes, I do. There was a lot of chatter about data tags. So one of the data tags questions for Laura is, will the recommendation tools include choice of appropriate usage license?
I think that depends on the questionnaire that you use. If that's included in the questionnaire, at the end result gives, for example, a recommendation that you should use this questionnaire, then this information will be sent as well through the application. But it depends on the application, what it will do with this information. So if for example, you create IROTS rules for this, that you should set terms of use using CC BY license, I don't know, then it will send that information to the repository, but then it's up to the repository how to handle this information. It depends on the configuration of your questionnaire and on the service itself. So.
Okay, I'm actually going to go to the next question for TRSA. Is there any intersection with DURI or GA4GH? And I'll put this into the chat, and that is going to be for Ilya.
I'm actually wondering if John Crabtree might be able to answer this. He was on the call.
Yes, but I'm not familiar with those. I'm definitely have to look into that. So the answer is I'm not sure either. I'm looking at them now.
Okay, I'm trying to post this question. I posted it 3 times. There you go. Any intersection with DURI or GA4GH?
Yes, it's very interesting, but I'm not. We have not coordinated with these PIs here at all.
Okay.
If the person who answered wants to just mention what it is, I'm not familiar with it. If not, we'll move on. Okay.
I think we can move on, Mercedes, because time is going. We had mostly comments about the OpenDP. They're not really questions, so I'm not going to introduce that here.
Okay, are we ready then for the breakout groups? Yes,
Yep.
how many would you like?
Let's present the questions again.
Yes, present the questions.
Okay.
Let me just introduce it. So I just want to say thanks for the presenters so far, and really interesting presentations, and for everyone who's here with us today. We would like to continue the great discussion that's already happening in the chat by putting people into about 6 or 7 people per breakout group. And then there are some prompts here that you see in the slide, and they're also in the discussion doc, which is pasted at the top of the chat. So we are hoping that you'll introduce yourselves briefly in the breakout groups and review these questions, which hopefully there will be something in there for you to discuss with the group. Really, we're interested in how the publishing and data use models that Mercedes presented and how the tools that our speakers presented, how they might apply to your installations or your institutions. So we look forward to having you put those notes in the document, and then we'll have a brief report back if there's time after the breakout rooms close. Breakout rooms will be open for 20 minutes. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had some good discussion in the groups, and we are going to pick up with some Q&A for the last 15 minutes.
The reporting of each group, right? I think.
Oh, sorry, I forgot about the reporting out. All right, I thought, we're magically on time. All right. Mercedes, did you have anything from your group that you wanted to report out, or is there anything?
Well, let's start with group 1. I think somebody else will volunteer, so Phil volunteer for our group. But yeah, let's go group 1, group 2, and
okay.
So group 1. Who's the volunteer for group 1?
I was actually in group 1, and I took some notes. I mean, I guess one of the themes that I saw was that the people in our group are really the ones who are responsible for publishing and potentially determining sensitivity, and people are looking for very clear guidance. And so there are some concerns with how of learning enough about differential privacy to use a tool like OpenDP, and the clarity of the tool that Laura presented sounds good. So I'll end there.
Okay. So group two, I can add later some comments to that of how some institutions are thinking about it, but let's go through all the groups first.
So group two, I'll start. I was in group two with Brian, Slava, Cheryl, Kat, Pietro, Ugo, Eve, Richard, and Dimitri. So 20 minutes is kind of too short. We kind of went through the first question. So about, I would say about half of the group has Dataverse installation already, and most of the group are either having Dataverse installation already or considering having Dataverse installation for long-term data kind of repository purposes. And then we came up, I think it was, I can't remember, sorry, which gentleman came up with a good name of gatekeeper, who is actually the who that decides which data is sensitive and whether to publish it where. So anyone else in our group wants to chime in?
Marcel, we just discussed that probably gatekeeper is the perfect name for DataTags backend after we'll implement it.
Yeah, okay. Good. So, yes, we can go to the next group. Group three.
Hi, I'm Erin. I'll report on our group, but if I miss anything, feel free to chime in. Group three. So the first question, do you anticipate making sensitive data available in your Dataverse installation? So a lot of us do get questions about, can I publish my sensitive data? Some of us don't have Dataverse set up yet, and some of us are part of Scholars Portal or recently joined Scholars Portal. And we do like the idea that Dataverse would help make sensitive data findable. So a number of us have a closed storage system for sensitive data, but that's not findable or really, well, even accessible really. We do get asked this question quite a bit. With about using a remote third-party secure enclave like Harvard's enclave, some of us would like to have a remote enclave for sensitive data, but that's not possible at the moment. One question we had was, would we have to make this ourselves? And there was a lot of discussion about who would be responsible for depositing the metadata and curating the data itself. We did have a lot of questions, like, you know, we would want to make sure we had people with the appropriate like ethical and legal expertise as well. And again, that varies from institution to institution. And with respect to using a tool such as OpenDP, yes, there's a lot of opportunities for this, for differential privacy. And there was a question about, is this available outside of the US as well? And we're using the MIT license, so it should be. Please correct me if I'm wrong on that. So that's it for us.
Great.
Thank you.
Group four, right? Have a volunteer for group four?
Maybe John?
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that for our group. We did have some interest in our group from several of the members about housing sensitive data and having the need. One particular thing that was brought up was that in many cases the sensitivity is geocodes, so geolocations, and how that'll be handled, and that's very critical. So dealing with sensitive geodata, especially given current crisis and the use of things like cell phone data and that have lots of privacy issues that are related around location and sensitive locations. We talked a little bit about who would run this, who would be the depositor. And one thing that I brought up that we discussed is that the trusted remote storage agent, there's a T in there for a reason. It's pretty easy to handle if the Dataverse owner and the trusted remote storage owner are the same person because they trust each other, obviously. But if you have a remote group, like an administrative, a government holding the data or another group holding the data, there has to be some sort of agreement between Dataverse and that remote storage. So it can't be storage that changes all the time. It needs to be trusted, and we need to be sure these packages don't change around because of the DOIs. So when you start thinking about who deposits that data and who publishes that data, the critical piece here is that they be trusted. And many researchers are not familiar with like FAIR requirements and being able to deal with that. And data curators and data publishers need to be involved in that. So while you may have groups like researchers that want to use TRSA and the IT groups that manage that for those researchers, they also need to have some publishing knowledge and understand that there's that trust within there. We also talked a little bit about maybe automating some of that with things like iRods, things that have ability to automate the publishing based on a set of rules or certain sets of folders potentially, maybe some of the ways to help those researchers. It would be good to do that. And we also talked a little bit about some common practices and being able to share those across groups, maybe encapsulating some of these things using containerization technology. So many groups would love to handle sensitive data, but they don't have the technology to do that. I may have missed some stuff, but anyone else feel free to chime in.
That's good, John. Thanks. I think just because of time, let's go to the next group, group 5, right?
I'll go ahead and step in just to get through this. This is Courtney. We didn't get past question 1, basically. We were introducing ourselves and started getting a bit into the different content that we had. So the perspectives we had in with regarding the kinds of sensitive data that we could envision being something we needed to face eventually came from archival perspectives, including things like email and other restricted content, from Health and Science Center library content, including health data, public health data stored at a third-party kind of black box facility. There was interest in best practices for managing sensitive data writ large, so outside of just management necessarily in Dataverse. We had, I brought up a project that we're doing in Texas with the IMLS on the feasibility of distributed digital preservation for private and sensitive data, and how that might apply to our Dataverse, as we will be using our distributed digital preservation system, Chronopolis, with our Dataverse in the coming few years. And then we had a complex question that I'm going to ask. If we want more details, somebody else might want to describe it, but it was basically being able to distinguish between having data that was de-identified in Dataverse connected to data sets stored in that kind of black box situation. So where the whole data set with all of the identifiable data was separate, but that there was a concurrent de-identified data set in the Dataverse. I think that covers it, but please jump in if it doesn't, y'all.
Great, thank you. Yeah, on this case, definitely want to support that case of that having a connection with some of the data set that needs to be in a data enclave with a release, so that can be published directly locally in Dataverse. Yes. So group 6.
Hi, I'm Phil, group number 6. I was impressed that Annie was able to rattle off all the people in her group. I don't think I've ever done everybody's name, but we had me, Mercedes, Christina, Martine, Chris, Kirk, Valentina, and Jorge, at least, and maybe others. Sorry if I forget your name. And like group 5, we spent some time getting to know each other, and then we focused on the question of what would be needed by installations of Dataverse and why, needed by the end users. So that was really the focus of our conversation. It was said that in a lot of cases, researchers have no confidence that there's the ability to share sensitive data within their institutions. They don't even think of it as a thing. There's a lot of excitement and need to be able to share sensitive data. Concerns about cost, like it'd be nice to piggyback off of existing Dataverse installations, for example, instead of having to install your own special installation of Dataverse. Seem to be interested in having a mix of sensitive and non-sensitive. It kind of goes together with having more centralized services that more people can use, whether or not they need sensitive data support. Talk of, this is similar maybe to Courtney's thing at the end about like, could there be like a scrubbed public, I guess, de-identified version of the data that's out there versus the real data is somewhere else. We like this point a lot about how the workflow sometimes for publishing a data set is, well, somebody sent me an email, and so I click publish. And we thought, well, it might be nice to have that workflow more inside of the system, possibly with a requirement for multiple people being able to, or having to approve the publication of a data set, especially if there's some sensitivity to it. And then at the end, we talked a little bit about some form of retention period where there's a requirement to have the data out there, but then there's also a requirement to delete the data after so many years. So that might be a nice feature to have built into Dataverse. I think that's it, but others can jump in. Thanks.
Thank you, Phil. Yeah, I think that's a great summary. The thing about retention is especially, well, it's very much the case with some data use agreements that require that. So the nice thing is that the metadata could still be available so that that data set existed, still resolve the citation, but the data might not be able to be maintained for a longer time. I think we have group 7. Is that the last one? Yeah. Yes. Somebody?
Okay, I'm happy to just quickly sum up what we said in group 7. So with the first question, anticipating making sensitive data available in installations, everyone is trying to figure out how to do it. Everyone wants to do it. It's hard for everybody. There has been a practice of storing the metadata, but not the data. So trying to make something accessible and visible and findable without having any link to the data whatsoever, and having a, who to contact button or email address available. That's still happening. There was some talk about the virtual data enclave at ICPSR, that everybody wants to share data and build on things, but there's always concern about how to share it responsibly. Within ICPSR, sharing access to that it occurs within the enclave, as does all of the manipulation to that data. There was some talk about even in an open repository, sensitive data still shows up. It would be great to have some easy to use tools to deal with smaller issues, singular variables that might be problematic or potential PII. There's also a great comment at the end was there's some use cases when the metadata may actually be more sensitive than the data itself. So there was some considerations of when locations of threatened species are listed in the metadata, things like that. Is there a way to still make these types of data available and discoverable, keeping in mind that the metadata itself might be significantly sensitive?
Thank you. Thank you. I think, well, we're running out of time, right, Tanya, Marianne?
We have hit our time, but we were thinking that for anybody who can stay on, we'll continue with Q&A.
Are there any questions to the presenters still, or maybe you can write it down in the chat? There's no option that people can have a mic, isn't it?
Yeah, they can. They can.
Yeah, folks can click on their microphones or raise their hand if they would like, or put a question into the chat.
I'd like to hear more about the DataTags recommendation tool, if possible.
To learn more, Michael? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah.
Laura, can you? What is your specific question, Michael? Or
basically, is where can I learn more about it to see how? Because we had some existing tools, and I wonder maybe we can collaborate, or maybe we missed something. Maybe there seems to be two tools that generally do the same thing. So I wonder, related work, I guess.
Are you asking about the questionnaire, or more about the service we made around the questionnaire?
Both. I mean, the question, our tool was basically, the questionnaire was just a parameter. We couldn't really decide on a single questionnaire, so we decided to make it a general tool, in a sense.
Okay, I can see that my colleague Eiko sends a link, and from there you can see the dance questionnaire. But it was made by my colleague, so about the content I don't know much, but.
And Michael, what exactly you want to know about this tool? Because I know you did this great job on initial data tags, and we also reused this, and but in a way that we used concept and we created completely new tool. And this tool is implemented as external service that can be connected basically to any data repository, so it's reusable, and you can use any questionnaire also, because it's quite easy operation just to put something in GitHub and it will read from GitHub, and you'll get new list of questions.
Maybe it's a good idea that Michael and Slava and Eiko have an email conversation.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, normally we just hit the pub somewhere near Harvard Square, but we do it virtually.
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah, so please contact Slava and my colleague Eiko. Is there?
It makes a lot of sense for them to talk. Yes. Yeah. Anything else? I see that there is a question about the adoption with Dataverse of all those tools. So we were very much working towards that. It's always hard to say exact time. So just one thing that I want to make clear, that at least for the Dataverse software, we need to first have this integration with some the impact components that we described, and the support for the data tags levels in order to provide trusted support for sensitive data. At the same time, in parallel, there is the OpenDP MVP, the minimal viable product, which is supposed to be for the fall, and we plan to have a use case that might not have already a full production Dataverse support for sensitive data, but at least has some pieces of that working that can integrate with OpenDP. So it's all within this year in these stages. For the recommendation tool, the tool is available. The thing is about integrating it with any Dataverse installation. You still need to have the trusted support a whole implementation of supporting sensitive data in a trusted way, right? But so I think it's within this year there will be different iterations of that working in parallel. Anybody wants to add to that? James or so?
That sounds right for us. You know, we're looking at deployments in the fall, like October, November, and doing that hand in hand with Dataverse integration.
Yeah. Yes. Any final thoughts, ideas? We'll make
I think it would be useful to explain, you know, some of that question, like who's going to be first, almost sounds like they're racing competing solutions. And I'd like to sort of encourage people to think of these things that have been presented as very complementary. You could imagine using the data tag to decide what level of protection you actually want with differential privacy, and then using the enclaves that were being suggested as the way to is the location to run the differential privacy algorithms in. So they're much more complementary, you know, and that's typically true in security and privacy, is that doing a little bit of everything is much more fail-safe than and using complementary strategies than depending on one thing as like a critical solution.
Right, I agree, and it was the intention to present it as all the presentations were tools or solutions that are complementary and work in parallel, integrating all of them with Dataverse to have a full solution for supporting sensitive data, plus probably other tools that will come later. So, well, I think like always, we run out of time, but I think we're learning a lot of things. This is there's a lot of brainstorming. There is a lot of well, it's a difficult topic because there are a lot of concerns that depend on each institution, each country, and all this, and there might be different considerations. But I think we're making good progress on the support of sensitive data with the components we presented today. Any final remarks, Tanya, Marian?
There's still a question Brian. I was wondering which might be closer to production that I should explore in more detail.
I think that like for again a lot of these sessions that we need always follow-ups, right? So for some of the things, for example, with John, Captain, with Ilya, and so forth, with respect to the implementation of the impact components that you are saying on the donatory service, and so I think that we could get it into, well, have just follow-up sessions just on that. If you want to learn in more detail of OpenDP, from the OpenDP, well, we have a lot of the links that were provided by James in the slides, so there's a lot of information there. I can contact the team there. And I don't know, from the recommendation tools, the same, the link. Is that good? Yeah, I see the question. So red data tag would indicate this Dataverse for metadata, but not for data themselves. So yeah, so again, one of the main things that maybe it's different than what we had presented or think about it before, considered before, is that there is a big difference in sensitive data support with non-sensitive data support. So if your data set is one of the data sets that you've been deposited in Dataverse so far, which is either a blue, green, or yellow, it's non-sensitive. It's considered non-sensitive. And usually, I know that there were questions about, well, that need clear guidance on that. Usually, each institution or organization has already a board or security team or so that will provide very clear guidance about what is considered non-sensitive and what is considered sensitive. And you should go first by that, right? Of course, all these recommendation tools help a lot and could help even these institutional boards. But this is for sure in every academic organization or institution, but also other research organizations would have that would provide that guidance. Okay, once that is determined, sensitive, non-sensitive, the sensitive could be either orange, red, or crimson, but for orange and red are the most common cases, are 2 levels of security and auditing that are required in those cases, and that one is for moderate sensitive data and the other for high sensitive data. For both of these cases, orange and red, the metadata can be in Dataverse, published in Dataverse, and through TRSA, it connects that metadata, it makes that metadata discoverable in Dataverse, and it points to the data in the right in the remote storage where it's the trusted remote storage, and the data enclave where it can be used. In that case, you would not be able to download the data through Dataverse. Is that clear? I know that is what I speed up a little bit maybe in the presentation. That's what I tried to put in the slides, but there is a lot of details probably that take a long time to explain. Is that helping clarify things?
Yeah, the one who asked you the question say thank you so much. So.
Oh, okay, good. That's always good to hear. Thank you. Thanks all of you. Maybe we just wrap up. I know I need to go to another session in 2 minutes. And it would be, wait, do you hear me?
I don't hear you anymore.
Just if you have any additional, any other thoughts, put it in the Google Doc, please. I would like to hear from any of you that as an organization that plans to support sensitive data, your thoughts about how you would like, whether you would be interested in the recommendation tools for data tags in the OpenDP, how would you like, what are your challenges in supporting sensitive data through Dataverse? So any of you who has who's part of an organization that has a Dataverse installation, please add your thoughts in and comments in the Google Doc. Thank you.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.